Welcome back to Only Talk Sports, and we talk sports every single day, or at least we try to. I'm your host, Jeffrey. Subscribe to the channel if you like sports content. Hit that notification bell so you never miss another video. Now, on Saturday night, there's a game between two pretty identical Pac-12 teams, with the Washington State Cougars traveling on the road to play at the Oregon State Beavers. Who do I think is going to win this game? Let's break it down. Now, Washington State is 4-2 and 1-2 to start this season, with Jake Dickert in his first season as the head coach. Obviously, he filled in last year when Nick Rolovich was fired midseason, but Jake Dickert has done a good job with Washington State. He's really improved them on both sides of the ball. Now, Washington State in Week 1 beat Idaho 24-17, and that was a good win, even though Idaho, a lot of people say that you probably should have beaten Idaho by more, but again, Idaho is playing good football this season, and they hung even with Indiana, so that was a good win for Washington State. Then Washington State won at Wisconsin 17-14. That was a fantastic win because winning at Camp Randall is hard to do, and Washington State was not expected to win that game. And then Washington State beat Colorado State 38-7. That was a good win because Colorado State's not a very good team, and Washington State blew them out. But then they lost to Oregon 44-41 in a game that they were leading in at the end, and then Oregon went down and scored a touchdown at the end, and that stunk for Washington State because, man, that would have been a huge win for them. Then they came back and beat California 28-9. That was a good win because California is a decent Pac-12 team this year. But then Washington State lost at USC 30-14, and this was a game that Washington State tried to be competitive in, but USC just had a lot more talent, especially on offense, and Washington State couldn't get the win. Quarterback Cameron Ward, the incarnate word transfer from the FCS, had 172 yards and 2 touchdowns to 5 rushing yards against USC. He's had better performances, but USC's defense is vastly improved, and he couldn't do too much on USC's defense, but Cameron Ward is a good quarterback, and the longer he will be in the FBS, he will only get better. Running back Jalen Jenkins had 130 yards and 54 receiving yards. He's a fantastic running back. You can even say slash receiver because he does both for Washington State, and he's very short, but he's very fast. Wide receiver Donovan Ollie had 35 yards, and wide receiver Dazon Stribling had 28 yards for Washington State against USC. They're going to have more receiving yards if they're going to beat Oregon State. On the defensive side of the ball, linebacker Dayan Henley had 7 tackles, defensive back Derek Langford had 3 tackles, and linebacker Brennan Jackson had 2 tackles for Washington State against USC. And Washington State's defense is a lot better than it used to be. They are still giving up a lot of points in some games, but they are better than they were when Mike Leach was the head coach. Now, on the Oregon State side, Johnathan Smith has really turned around Oregon State because Oregon State's been a struggling program for a long time since the early 2000s. They have not had many good seasons, but he's really turned around. They made a bowl game last year, but they are 4-2 and 1-2 to start this season, just like Washington State. And they've had some up and down results. They beat Boise State in Week 1 34-17, and that was a really good win because Boise State is one of the better Group of 5 programs in the country, and they got the win there. Even though Boise State might not be as good this year, that was still a good win. Then they won at Fresno State 35-32, same thing. Fresno State, a better Group of 5 team in the country, and even though Fresno State might not be as good now that Kalen DeBoer is at Washington, it was still a good win for Oregon State. Then they beat Montana State 68-28, good win there. Then they lost to USC 17-14. At home, and this was a game that obviously a lot of people know that Oregon State has spoiled USC a lot. At home, Oregon State's beaten them tons of times, and Oregon State could not get the win, but they were really competitive in this game, and if they had just scored one more time, they could have won. Then they lost at Utah 42-16. This was a game that they just came off the USC game, and Utah just blew them out. They just couldn't do anything. But then they won at Stanford 28-27. This was a really important game for Oregon State because of the fact they were on the road at Stanford and they were losing, but they came back and won, and this was a big game because Oregon State needed this win to kind of build some confidence coming into this game against Washington State because Oregon State had been struggling a little bit, especially with Chance Nolan not playing too well and being hurt and all, and quarterback Bengal Branson, who is now the quarterback playing for Oregon State right now until Chance Nolan can recover, or maybe they won't even use him anymore. Bengal Branson had 250 yards and 2 touchdowns against Stanford. He played well, and if he continues to play at the level that he's playing at, he will be the new starting quarterback for Oregon State. Running back Damian Martinez at 83 yards and a touchdown, and running back Jamius Griffin at 75 yards for Oregon State against Stanford. And Oregon State's rushing attack has been improving as the season's been going on, and that's really good news because it will take the pressure off of whoever's going to be the quarterback for Oregon State the rest of the season. Wide receiver Trayshawn Harrison had 104 yards and a touchdown for Oregon State against Stanford. He's a really good wide receiver, and Oregon State's going to need him to continue to have big games like this if they're going to win more games in the future. And on the defense side of the ball, linebacker John McCartan had 3 tackles, defensive back Ryan Cooper Jr. had a tackle and an interception, and linebacker Corey Stover had a tackle for Oregon State against Stanford. And Oregon State's defense in the USC game was really good, but in other games they've given up some points, so they've been kind of up and down, but their defense is improved just like Washington State's is from what it was in the past. So who do I think is going to win this game? Both these teams are really identical because their records are the same. They're both 4-2 and 1-2 in the conference. In the Pac-12 this season, both teams were teams that in the past were really bad, especially Oregon State, but now they're a lot better than they used to be. And both these teams are pretty good on offense. I think Washington State is a better offensive team than Oregon State overall, even though Oregon State's had its moments of really good offense. But I do think Oregon State's defense, particularly the secondary, is better than Washington State's. I think Washington State's defense has its moments where they're can be pretty good, but I think Oregon State's defense is better overall than Washington State, and I think that's going to be enough for Oregon State to beat Washington State 35-31. Now, I think Washington State can win this game, but this game is at Oregon State, and that is a big key when two teams are very similar, and it's really hard to tell the difference between the two. Usually, a lot of times, the home team can pull it out, and Oregon State is very tough when they're at home, and their crowd is going, and it's very tough to win in Corvallis. I got Oregon State winning. I think that they're going to get the job done. Johnathan Smith's going to find a way to beat Jake Dickert's Washington State club. I think Oregon State's going to find a way to win this game 35-31 over Washington State. Subscribe to the channel if you like sports content. Like this video down below. Comment down below whether you think Washington State or Oregon State's going to win this game and why. And I will see you next time.